let's look at what the National CAD standard says about line weights. And we're going to skip over some of this kind of quickly. I just want to give you the high points. So architectural drawings have a whole bunch of different line weights to distinguish things. We will look at what they are. Those of you who have studied mechanical drafting might remember that in the mechanical world, life is simple. We just have two line weights, thick and thin. That's it. In the architectural world, we have many line weights. Your title block is already set up with the right line weights. Let's go look at that. So here's our title block. And if I open the layer properties, here are the layers that I've set up for you. And here are the line weights. And if I ever wanted to change a line weight, I would just click on the line weight, and this line weight box would pop up, and I could select a different thickness if I wanted to. But I don't want to right now. All right. Here are the standard line weights that you have available according to the National CAD standard. You can use really fine lines, and we won't be using those in this class, but if you had some very fine hatching, you could use 0.13 or 0.18 of a millimeter. The most common line weights, and the ones that we are using, are these: thin, medium, and wide. And we'll look at these one at a time. Thin is what you use for dimensions, text, most lines except for walls, so center lines, hidden lines, dimension lines, all that sort of thing. Oh, and phantom lines, like we will use in the overhang of our roof, the hidden lines in our floor plan. Then medium lines are what we use for objects, primarily walls, and they are 0.35 of a millimeter. Wide lines are grade lines. I will show you that in just a second. That's where you show where you've cut through the soil. These lines are from a textbook written by our textbook author. I'm going to skip through these, but he's just showing you thin lines are this. Again, medium lines are this. Thick lines are this. Here is the grade line I wanted to show you. So here's a plan view of some building and an elevation view of some building, and notice how there are a number of different line thicknesses or line weights in this drawing, and how that communicates fairly clearly. And notice this line down at the very bottom, that irregular line, that says grade line, that represents the soil, the earth. And we typically make that line in an elevation or section view, we typically make that line wide. It's also common to make the profile where the edge of the building touches the air. It's typical to make that wide in some drawings. And speaking of some drawings, some architects really like to use a whole library of line weights to communicate. And just as a simple example, here's a stack of cubes. And these three views here, these examples, show top views of the cubes looking down on the stack. Here's the first example where they're all just one line weight. You can't really tell what's going on from the top view. In the middle, this example shows all of them outlined with a profile line. Okay, now we know where they contacted the air, but you still can't tell what's going on. Now in the bottom example, example 3, notice that this cube is thick, this cube is medium, and this cube is thin. And what that tells you, once you get used to reading these, is that this cube right here is close to you. it must be sticking up highest. And I will share with you, when I took a drawing class in architecture school years ago, back when we were using pencils for everything, they made us really practice making. We had to draw things and we had to figure out which was closest, and we had to make that with thick lines and so on and so forth. You wind up with a drawing that really communicates. But not everybody does that, especially in construction documents. Here's a sketchy example showing how, if you have these three shapes in the middle of the screen here, and you make one of them thick, it is clear that that one it's kind of popping out of the screen at you. It's showing that this one is close to you, and the one with the thin lines is far from you. Here, on the right edge of the screen, is one that's done wrong. It's backwards, and you can see how your brain just can't quite figure out what is happening there. That's because you need the one closest to you to have a thick line if you're going to distinguish. And that is related to an idea called atmospheric perspective. When you come down off the top of a hill, maybe you're coming off 30th Avenue looking towards the college in Mount Pisgah, you notice that the trees and the hills close to you are darkest. Hills a little bit farther away get a little bit lighter, farther away lighter still, and the color gets less saturated. The color gets washed out. The reason for that, and the reason they call it atmospheric perspective, is that you have air molecules in between you and the distant hills, and the farther away the hills are, the more molecules between you and them, so that extra layer of atmosphere kind of washes out, covers over those distant hills. So that's called atmospheric perspective. Finally, this is the part I'm going to skip over. I just want you to know that this is a thing in the interest of thoroughness. The National CAD Standard recommends certain layer colors be used with certain line weights, and we are not going to do that in this class. Most offices in our area do not do that either. They use their own particular colors. And the reason they do not do that is, if you look at the National CAD Standard chart here, you'll notice that some of these colors, if you had them on a black model space screen, you wouldn't be able to tell one from the other, and they wouldn't stand out very well, and it's just annoying. So most of us don't use these colors, but here they are in case you work for an office that needs them. The numbers here in the chart are the red, green, blue index numbers, and if you go to the index colors in the AutoCAD screen, you'll see they give a red value, a green value, and a blue value. Yet, by the way, you will also find this if you use a program like Photoshop or Illustrator. You use red, green, blue as well. The reason we might want to use these colors is we might be working in an office that has clients or customers that use a different kind of software, MicroStation for example, and then we want to have some consistent color. In the old days of pen plotters, we needed these because your plotter would actually have ink pens of different line weights, and the way you would tell the plotter which size of pen to pick up is you would make each line a different color, and there was a plot style table in the drawing that said, if you get a red line, dear plotter, you are supposed to go pick up a line of such and such a thickness. If you have a yellow line, you were supposed to pick up a pen of a different thickness. So back then it made sense. And if you're working with people who use MicroStation, it might make sense. Let me just real quickly show you the red, green, blue, and HSL color index in case you're interested. If you're not, you can drop out of this video now. Here is our AutoCAD title block again, and I'm going to click on the layer properties. Here are the colors that we have set with these different layers. So here's my wall layer. If I click on this color, the AutoCAD index color window opens up, and if I click on one of these, there's an AutoCAD index color down here. If I go to the true color, you will notice that right down here in the bottom it says RGB. That's for red, green, blue. This is what degree of red there is, what degree of green there is, and what degree of blue there is in this mix of paint colors, as it were. Now, this true color picker uses a thing called HSL, hue, saturation, lightness. Luminance is lightness. And you could ask it to switch to the other model. The default is it does these things. And there's a whole field of color science that I would be happy to talk to you about sometime if you're interested. It can be measured precisely and scientifically, so just let me know if you're interested. Meanwhile, that's it for line weights.